Welcome to our second Wednesday safety session for June 14th, 2023. My name is Carlos Carrillo. I'm the Executive Director of the South Florida chapter of the Associated General Contractors of America. Our second Wednesday safety sessions are dedicated to the safety community in the entire state of Florida. We're hosting this meeting live at the offices of Kelly Cronenberg in South Florida and Davie. But we have folks joining us in Orlando, Tampa, and Jacksonville. And we're grateful for all of you being part of this event and this community, right? Our job here is to help you all make your job site safer. And I'm really glad to be part of that. Offices of Kelly Cronenberg, fantastic organization. Kelly Cronenberg has been hosting us now for this year and pre-COVID for about another year. So we're very grateful to the Kelly Cronenberg team for opening up their offices to us. I also want to thank the team at Universal Engineering for sponsoring our breakfast at our safety sessions this year. Their safety team is fantastic. And thank you to the team at Universal. Last but certainly not least, I want to give a thank you and make an introduction. I want to thank the team at Milwaukee. Milwaukee is the title sponsor of our safety session. It was great. They actually came up to us and asked us how they could help. And you know, they've come through as the title sponsor for this event. I'm very grateful to the Milwaukee team, and I'd like to introduce one of their new team members, Jared Geisler. Mr. Geisler, come on up and give yourself a quick introduction to our community. Jared just came down from Milwaukee, so he's the real McCoy. So we'll let Jared come on up and introduce himself to you.
Sure. How's it going, guys? Thanks, Carlos. Again, my name's Jared. New territory manager down here in South Florida, covering the GC and concrete guys. So really excited to be down in the market, part of the Milwaukee family. I've been here for about a month now, kind of just making my rounds, trying to hit all of you guys' top sites, meet you all. So really excited to continue building the relationships that have already been established by our awesome team. Just a little background, previously, you guys may have worked with Roger Flores, so I'm technically going to be backfilling him, working with Dario now. So super excited, kind of brief introduction, but looking forward to hitting your sites, meeting you guys, and kind of showing you what Milwaukee Tool has to offer in terms of safety, tooling, just support on job sites overall. So super excited to be here. Cool.
Yeah, Jared and the Milwaukee team are fantastic. Roger's still in Milwaukee. We'll still see him from time to time. You know, he likes to show up at our events, especially where there's open bar drink tickets. So we'll continue to see him. Speaking of, Milwaukee is the title sponsor of our fishing tournament, which is going on in just a couple of weeks. So if anybody in here or online is interested in coming down to Marathon with us for the Keys, hurry up. Although you can always enter a boat at the last minute, we're down to the last few hotel rooms. We actually had to go on hotels.com and book rooms to make sure that we had some to give out. So if you're interested in joining us, I need to know ASAP. All right, well, that being said, thank you, Mr. Geisler and your team. I know that you all, the safety professionals in our circle, are focused on the prevention of accidents and emergencies on your job sites. But there are things that happen that are out of your control. Being prepared for such an instance and having a plan that you and your team all understand is an important responsibility. Here to discuss the best practices that you all should have in place to deal with a crisis on your job site, we have an industry professional with 20 years of extensive risk management and business operations experience in the construction industry, managing complex risk financing and risk mitigation strategies for large clients and projects. I'm very proud and happy to welcome American Global's Insurance Senior Vice President of Florida Operations, Ms. Issy Bustamante. Ms. Bustamante, please, the floor is yours.
Morning. I'm going to set up my PowerPoint. Give me 1 second. It's sure. Okay, here we go. So good morning. Thank you guys for having me here today. We're here to talk about crisis management, but I'm going to give it to you from a little different perspective. You guys are safety professionals. You know how to do a hurricane preparedness plan. You know what to do when there's an accident on site. I want you to start thinking about it maybe from a risk management standpoint. And I know some of you guys in here may have a dual role and maybe doing safety, but also maybe some claims, maybe safety and some risk management. So the idea today is to give you a little bit of a risk management perspective and hopefully help you or give you some tips that maybe you haven't considered previously. So a little about me. Okay, a little about me. As Carlos says, I've been in the industry 20 years, 10 years on the carrier side, and then 10 years on the broker side, which is where I am now. So before, or when I started out of college and I was hired by Liberty Mutual Insurance Company, and I started as a baby adjuster and I was handling claims for construction in the Northeast. And if any of you guys have worked for Turner Construction or with Turner Construction, a very sophisticated outfit. And that's where I learned how to really start establishing your team of professionals. Who is your team when there's a claim, when there's a crisis, and how do you build those teams, and what does that consist of? Who are the experts that are going to be your really in your pool if you need them? And so I got to work with the finance professionals, and really that was all claims management. And then I moved over to AXA Insurance Company and did a lot more on a product side. So we're talking about maybe building facades and a lot of little more claims on professional liability. So I'll touch on that a little bit as well. And then I was very lucky to be able to move into the broker side. And when I come from New York, I was managing the really risk management piece for our owner developers or large contractors. And so if you think about some of the mega projects in New York, the Hudson Yards, Port Authority of New York, New Jersey, the World Financial Center, the World Trade Center, all that new construction, I was very fortunate to be part of, really from a risk side. And so what does that mean? My team really was constructing the crisis management or the incident response that was happening at those sites. If you guys are familiar at all with the New York market, it's a very tricky market, very similar to here in terms of the litigation, the capacity for litigation to take on a life of its own. In New York, there are strict labor laws. And so if there's anything that falls from a height, whether it's a person or something that strikes somebody from above, is considered strict liability. And so what that means is that the owner and the general contractor most always is going to be sued, and they're not going to have a defense. It doesn't matter if the injured worker was on the cell phone going down the ladder and he's not supposed to. You're going to be responsible for that. It doesn't matter if somebody intentionally dropped a hammer and hit him in the head. You're going to be responsible as a general contractor. So it really was an environment where you needed to be on the offensive, and you could never be on the response side only because you were really going to get eaten by the plaintiff's attorneys. So we created this great protocol. I'm going to share a little bit about that with you guys in a little bit. So that's kind of my experience there. And then I was fortunate enough to go on more of the broking, the creating the policies. And so I realized all the things that you need for incident response, and I started building it on the policy side. So when you place an insurance policy, how do you build it so that you have all these support from your insurance carrier? You don't necessarily have to pay out of pocket. So started doing that, and fortunate enough to be doing that with American Global today. So anyways, I'm happy to be here. And hopefully this is an interactive session and you guys can chime in with some questions for me. It's not necessarily a one-way street here. So here's my agenda. I'm going to cover types of business crisis, some key statistics. What is crisis leadership? We're going to talk about crisis management skills, resilient planning, the plans itself, a little bit about post-crisis evaluation, insurance, of course, and then some key takeaways. So what is a business crisis? These are the 4 key elements of a business crisis. One, it can be internal or external. So something that happens within your company or something outside of your company that's affecting the company itself. It is a situation that's uncontrollable or without resolution at the moment. It's something that must be addressed because if it's not, there's a risk of organizational damage or failure. So there are 8 types of crisis management from a business scenario that you may encounter. There's some probably more as safety professionals than others. So financial is anything where a organization can be impacted by balance sheets. So in today's economy, unfortunately, that is something that we are seeing mostly on the surety side. So some contractors with cost escalation issues or contract matters are seeing themselves in some financial hardships. Personnel is one of illegal, immoral, or unethical activities. So think about employee theft, think about sexual harassment, discrimination. Tyson Foods during COVID, for example, made their employees come to work at the factories, and that had a very big COVID spread, and a lot of their employees started, unfortunately, to get sick, and a lot died also. So they had a really big scandal and crisis in their hands and how they managed that. So that's an example of a personnel crisis. Organizational crisis is situations where organizations have significantly wronged its customers or its employees. So it's really an idea of deception and misconduct. So if you think about Google, there was a really big scandal a couple of years ago that it was spying on its employees. And it was following everything they were doing in their internal lives. So that is an example of organizational crisis. Technological crisis is sudden and unexpected. You guys, I don't know if you've experienced this, but any of you guys have experienced any hacking within your company?
Who hasn't?
Right? So a lot of the stuff that we're seeing from our contractors and some of our clients is that project managers' email gets hacked. The email links gets into a folder that they will never see. Communication gets intercepted with the client, payment gets sent to a wrong account. That is a typical technological crisis. Sometimes it's really big. You think about Target. A couple of years ago, it's one of their subcontractors actually, unfortunately, they were unsecured and they leaked out a whole bunch of information, personal information from their customers. So that was a really big crisis on Target's hands. Natural crisis, Hurricane Ian, right? Anything natural crisis, tornadoes, hurricanes, earthquakes. A confrontational crisis, it's internal dispute among senior leadership. So if you think about boycotts, protests, I can think of CrossFit, for example. A couple of years ago, their CEO made comments against George Floyd incident, and they literally, he had a boycott on him. They lost so much money, they had to remove him as CEO, and really the image suffered a lot of reputational harm there. Workplace violence, unfortunately, that's a really big one. Obviously, violence at the hands of an employee or ex-employee. You see a lot of active shooter. Unfortunately, it's happening across. This week there was a town hall here in Broward for situations that seek to address active shooter situations in schools. So that's a very real threat. Something probably you may be able to experience, not be able to, but could experience in one of your sites. So something to keep in mind and be ready for. And then the last one is malevolence. So it's really when competitors use criminal or legal ways to really try to destabilize a firm. So product sabotage, hacking, things of that sort. So of these, there's probably a few that you are probably going to see through your life or have seen. Are any of these that we talked about sticking out to you guys in terms of something that you've seen historically?
Yes.
Yeah. So I would think personnel, right? If you think about a fatality on your site, unfortunately, that happens. How do you deal with a fatality and potentially a media issue? Hurricanes, water damage, concrete overspray is one of my favorites. I had these really high rises in New York City, and they were doing concrete work, and it was Friday afternoon, and I get a call at 5 o'clock that they had done concrete overspray to the adjacent building, and right below it, the deck was full parked cars, and they had all concrete. Now, concrete cures and damages the paint and the vehicle itself. So we were lucky enough to have a crisis management plan in place for that. So we had already sought out investigators. We had the guys on site. We knew of a car wash in the area, and we struck a quick deal with them to go out and clean the vehicles. We left notes in the vehicles, windshields, and if there was a claim, it really wasn't that much because we were able to address it immediately. But that is one of the things that I myself had to deal with. Active shooter, of course, we've talked about that, and crane collapse is one that we've seen unfortunately over the years. So those are the couple of ones that fall in some of these buckets. So here's some examples of the most expensive corporate crises that we have experienced. The first one is the BP Deepwater Horizon oil leak. That one cost BP about $70 billion in cleanup costs and settlements and fines. And really the lesson there was to create a safety culture. The second one was Wells Fargo's. They had a sales practice scandal and they were opening up accounts, really fake accounts, really just to earn that commission. That cost them $7 billion in regulatory and legal settlements. And that was more about live up to your values. They had values they forgot to live up to. The third one is JP Morgan Chase. So they also had a financial exposure crisis and it cost them $6.2 billion. And the lesson there was that the C-suite needs to be on top of the risk. And we'll talk about the C-suite in a little bit. Facebook is another one. It's the user privacy scandal. Being, again, it's kind of that a big brother watching situation. They had to pay $5 billion in fines. And then the last one is Equifax data breach. It cost them $1.7 billion in settlements. So a lot of their, imagine Equifax, who manages your credit, releases your social security, all your personal information. That is a really big issue for them and obviously for the users of Equifax. So here's some of the key statistics for crisis. Leaders who experienced a crisis over the last 5 years were 69% of organizations that Price Waterhouse study revealed. 95% of respondents expect a crisis to hit within the next 2 years. But here's the silly part, 49% of the companies that responded have a crisis scenario. So think about it, 95% of their leadership believes 95% possibility of having a crisis in the next 2 years, but only 49% actually have a plan to address it. So there is really a big discrepancy between knowing something's coming and actually planning for it. So there's a new term called crisis leadership, which I actually really like. It's the leadership style that focuses on adapting to constant disruptors by focusing on building resilience. So how do you do that? It's by analyzing response methods by crisis. So the different crises that you might encounter, developing effective plans for each of those crises, and then also developing a strong communication platform for your internal and external resources. And then it's making it your corporate culture. If it's not a top-down approach, if your C-suite is not involved or is not really key and central to putting this plan together, it's not necessarily going to work the way you want it to. So their buy-in is completely important in crisis leadership. And so I want to talk to you guys about your role as safety professionals and how you can lead through a crisis. So there's 5 crisis leadership skills. Communication, we talked about the ability to stay calm, to speak in a very clear, simple way, what you need to do. We're going to talk a little bit more about the plan because that's a really big deal with crisis. If you think about when the media shows up, what do you say? What does your team say? How are you instructed? Who's your corporate communications manager? So it's all the different pieces that need to be discussed beforehand. The adaptability, how adaptable are you? Yes, you plan for this crisis, but this crisis happens. Can you use some of your resources that you've already established, some of the plan that you already established and moved it over to create a response for this particular crisis that you hadn't anticipated? Emotional intelligence. When you're in the middle of a crisis, you're going to deal with a lot of people who are upset, who are scared, who don't understand. You yourself may be feeling all those emotions. How do you deal with all of that that's happening within you? And also still be responsible for identifying that in other people and then keeping the calm within that, that state. Relation management is going to be important. Not only are you going to be project managing the crisis, but also your team. how does your team respond and how do you get them to respond? If they're not clear, how do they know to come to you and say, I'm not really clear what I'm supposed to do? It's really more of constantly managing those relationships. And then creativity. Sometimes you just have to pivot and you have to do it immediately. So how can you be creative? How can your team be creative and have the ability and capacity to do that themselves? So we talked about resilience. I think about a couple of few things. One of them is integration. So for me, identifying key resources is going to be important. First, you're going to need a crisis management team lead. Is that going to be you? Are you guys going to be putting a plan together and going to be deploying your resources? There has to be someone that is the key person. And the other one is, who's your team? So when I was building these crisis managers for my client, it was really more to respond to things that were happening on the site. So the biggest thing that happens on the site is an injury. So who did we need? We needed obviously our site super that knew if something were to happen, they were going to call us. We needed an on-site medic, on-site medic in New York. And I know that some sites have them here if you do, if the project's large enough, but do you have your medic? Does your medic know where to treat the employee? But not only that, what we do also is we would scout the areas around the project and we would strike up a deal with those medical clinics and say, here's our insurance. If these guys come to you, here are the tests that you're able to do. If you have to do further testing, you have to communicate with us. Because what happens is these medical clinics run up these bills and they start diagnosing things without even having an idea of what happened. And so now you have an employee that potentially just came in for a cut, having, back issues, and now you have a really big workers' comp claim in your hands. It's really just managing that relationship with the medical clinics. The other thing is, if it's a fatality, if it's something really large, you're going to have, or you're going to want a legal team present, right? When the media gets a hold of what's happening, they're going to come to your site. You should have a defense team that's going to come here. Why are legal people important? Why is having a defense attorney important? Because
Fire with fire.
Fire with fire, but also it protects you because they have a cloak of a client attorney privilege, right? So anything that you're going to put in writing, I would say hold off in a crisis. Hold off until your attorneys come here. Sometimes when we're doing initial investigations, we're so focused, and I know this is interesting. My background is claims. I've always worked with safety professionals in making these crisis plans. My safety professionals always wanted to do the root cause analysis. I want to write this down. I want to do interviews and I want to do all these things. From my standpoint, it was like, no, yes, let's do all of it, but let's make sure that when we're doing those reports, we are doing it in front of our attorneys and we're protecting that because everything is discoverable. Everything is discoverable. Everything that you write, that you text, that you email is going to show up in the court. Some way, somehow, that email is going to be pulled up and you're going to be able to see that for a jury, and the jury is going to say, you guys are responsible, you have to pay. So again, it's creating that environment of protection with having a lawyer present. An investigator, right? You have an investigator that's going to come out. If you have a fire incident, who's that marshal that's going to be doing the investigation? Do you have a relationship with that marshal? All that is very important. Your public relations firm, your broker from an insurance standpoint, security, of course, yourself at safety. It's all going to be key. That's going to be your team. And again, every crisis is going to have a different set of team, but really, it should really be the main folks that are going to be responsive to you guys and to your team. So these guys they're going to be your first line and then your greater response team. So they're going to separate into two. And then the second one is going to be create an escalation framework. So it's determining the severity of the crisis. So I've worked with clients that have decided, green, yellow, red. Red is, red code is something the media is coming, and this is a really big crisis in our hands. We have to deploy, the crisis team. And then we have clients that do it by levels, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. So whatever works for you guys, so long as you are able to identify, this is maximum crisis and this is something that's manageable, and maybe with a couple of folks, we can handle the situation, the investigation, and then the next steps. So we have to create a crisis communication tree. That's going to be important. Because your first line of defense is the people that you're gonna call. You're not gonna email, you're gonna call and say, I have a problem. The building collapsed or partially collapsed. We wanna hold off. I know the media is gonna be alerted soon. What do we do? So you get on that phone call together. It's a quick call and everyone says, we're gonna deploy. So this person, that person, the other person. Okay, team leader's gonna make that call and all these folks are gonna be deployed and they're gonna go to the site. So that is the first line to face determines what's going to happen. Your greater response team then comes to your aid and your help. And each one is going to be responsible for their own particular part of the crisis response, which comes to assigning roles and responsibilities. So you want to have a clear chart. You're going to be who's responsible for communications. What are they going to be doing? What does that mean, responsible for communications? Customer support, legal, social media, marketing, HR. Again, this is going to be very specific to you guys. For me, it would be who's also my investigator, who's my nurse case manager. Somebody's in the hospital. Who's going to go to that person's aid? I had a situation where a gentleman was loading a forklift into a truck, because they were going to bring it to a second site. And he was inside the forklift as he drove onto the lift gate. And then he was on it as the lift gate was going up. The forklift drove back and he fell off the forklift, off the lift gate, fractured his spine, fractured his skull. He had internal bleeding. He gets transported to the hospital right away. So we, in that situation, get the call right away. We deploy our resources. The first thing is, somebody from the site has to go to the hospital with, and just make sure that we notify the families. At that point, we had appointed a nurse case manager, and what they are is a resource that insurance carriers provide. And they go to the site and the hospital, and they sit with the employee and they advocate on their behalf. And they explain to them what's the medical situation, because they're scared, their families are scared. The nurse who was attending this injured worker said, I have a friend who's a lawyer, and they're going to come and take your statement. The nurse case manager was sitting there and said, absolutely not. We will not have that.
You're gonna be okay.
And they reported the nurse too, because that's not their role. That, I was very proud of that. That hospital that was attending this employee wasn't doing the right things. And a nurse case manager identified that and said, we have to transfer him now, because we are going to have a situation with maybe a TBI or a traumatic brain injury in the future. So we transferred him. We got approval to get him transferred him. And this is the biggest success that I've had in my career, especially in New York. This gentleman went back to work within 2 months, and he never filed a claim, an action over claim, because he felt taken care of. He felt that his company, who continued to pay him, by the way, he was out of work for 2 months. He received full pay, and he continued to get that care from that independent nurse case manager. And he felt his family was taken care of, that the company wasn't trying out to get him. And he didn't file a lawsuit. And that's what happens when you are prepared. When you have a group of people that are ready to respond, you're able to prevent things like litigation or the media. So again, having roles and responsibilities are super important. So what does your crisis management plan look like? So there is 5 phases to it. The first one is alerting your first line of defense that we talked about. Determining then what needs to happen, who's going to be engaged if the crisis is going to go above certain level. The second one is going out and assessing the problem. What's the crisis? Who's involved? What needs to happen? Who do you need to come out there? 3 is you're going to activate your second level of response, right? The people that are going to come help you. 4 is you're going to administer your plan as discussed. You're going to reach out to, and everyone's going to coordinate, do their job, and then you're going to adjourn. Everyone's going to come back. You're going to debrief within 24 hours. Best cause. What happened? What we've collected today, and what are our next steps? And you follow that within the next couple of weeks until everything's completed. Investigation for a serious incident usually takes a couple of weeks to collect. And it could take a couple of months when all the plan all the reports are completed and you collect the information from if there's fire marshals, if there's police that show up. So these are all the 5 phases of a crisis management plan. Any questions or any comments so far, guys?
What was the root cause of the accident?
For ours, for
Forklift?
the forklift was, he was not supposed to be on the forklift.
Right, yeah, that part we all know.
Yeah.
But what was the reason why it rolled off and any,
It was still running
okay,
at that time, so we had to, that was also, we were potentially getting issues because of improper hiring and proper training, but
that's what I wanted to, okay.
so that was what we were trying to defend against us, so we had delved into a deep investigation. We did find it was he created an error with his team, but he never filed a lawsuit, so we were lucky enough to never have to defend that one.
But he wasn't wearing a seatbelt, which probably would have prevented him being tossed.
Yeah, but you think about it, the forklift is the lift gate was like 4 feet and he was like another 4 feet or 3 feet. So he fell pretty significant
At
height.
least 12 feet.
Yeah, at
When the
least
head-
12
when
feet.
the- Yeah, when the
That's-
head hit the ground. right?
Exactly, at least 12 feet. And he had significant injuries.
He was saying seatbelt, I'm saying heart rate, but.
Yeah. Again, it shouldn't have happened. It shouldn't have been in the forklift as you were in the lift gate.
Here, why would there be improper hiring?
Improper hiring of the person, or were they trained as a forklift operator? These are a potential, yeah.
Training, why improper hiring?
That's one of the allegations that usually get brought into a lawsuit. And so you look at it from that standpoint. Did you hire the correct person? Did you give them correct training? Because you are liable as an employer to make sure that you're vetting the right level of
So
folks.
negligent hire?
Negligent hire. Yeah. So this is the communication plan. So we talked a little bit about the crisis plan. This is a communication plan. The first thing is when you are communicating to your internal group, to your external group, to the media, to your shareholders, to the public, one is acknowledge. You have to demonstrate empathy and values and apologize if there's something to apologize for. Address it. What's the commitment you're making as a company? Is it procedural? Is it substantive? And this is something that's going to be determined, obviously, before the statements are made. Simplify it, stick with the facts, speak concisely and empathetically. This is key. We don't go into big tangents because the more we give, the more they poke holes in what we say. And then the important thing is one voice. Be genuine and authentic. There's been, and I don't know if you guys use crisis management cards on your sites, but there are these cards that you can create, and you pass them out. It usually has a safety number, an emergency number on one side, and on the other side, it's a corporate statement. And it's simple as, at this time, we're currently investigating facts surrounding the circumstance. When we know more, we'll be able to address it. That's it. The no comments, as I'm sure you guys know, is just very detrimental to the company view. People are gonna think that you're hiding something, even though really you don't have comment, you don't know what's going on. And the reality is, sometimes it's okay to say, I'm not sure what's happening right now, we're investigating. So a little corporate statement that you give to your team that they have in their card, just in case they have to go out in a mess like that. But ideally, you've already had this plan in place, you've already communicated to them in a crisis moment. We all stay here until our attorney comes in and our communication spokesperson comes in. Once they're here, then they're able to address the media or they're able to address the larger team. We don't want to be making statements that no one's aligned to. So the communication plan has to be determined and it also has to be agreed to by that key team that we've established in the beginning. And then there is going to be the post-crisis evaluation. So you talked about after it, you're going to do a debrief, you're going to do the next steps, and that's all going to happen naturally. But once that's tailored off and the crisis has been managed, there should be a post-crisis evaluation. So it's really getting together with your first year and your extended team, sitting down and saying, okay, how did we respond? That's first response is the first column. Did we do it promptly? Was it informatively? Was it sincere? Was it honest? Was it humble? Did we get the help that we needed? Was it? So you're gonna create this as it pertains to you guys, right? This is a sample. I'll share the presentation with Carlos. He can share it with you guys. The next thing is the follow up. Who's gonna follow up and what changes do you need to make? right? So that didn't work. How can we do it better next time? What do we need? Every time there's a crisis, you're going to figure out there's something that didn't work well, but there's going to be an opportunity to fix it, adjust it. When I started creating these crisis management plans, we had this communication tree that we would put this chart, and we started deploying it, and we're very proud of it, but we would find holes. And as my team continued to grow and they started doing their own crisis management for each project that they were working on, they just made it better and better. By the time I was leading that team, they had created this process that was just so iron tight. But that is the beauty of, unfortunately, having to practice it and then making sure you're going and you're learning and you're adjusting. So it's really about adjusting. It's not set it and forget it. It does not work, because in the time of crisis, no one's going to remember what they were supposed to. So as professionals, what can you guys do, safety professionals, with your team, with your C-suite, to make sure you're practicing this? At the very least, every 6 months, let's just get in and talk about it. Let's just talk about it. Do we know who's doing what? Can we tweak it? So that's a very important part of the plan. Oh, Carlos, I'm kind of going over. I'm so sorry, I didn't notice that. All right, I'm gonna go super quick on some of these. Insurance recovery, super key. I know you guys okay. I know you guys are not necessarily always thinking about insurance, but at the end of the day, insurance is there. It is something that you can, are you going to transfer some of that risk over to you, to that carrier? That's what you're paying premium dollars for as a company and organization. However, when we get locked into crisis mode, that's all we're doing. We're figuring out what to do with the crisis. The biggest problem that we encounter in situations like this is that we're not reporting to the carriers timely. And so a lot of the claims don't get paid out because it's late claim reporting. And so not all the policies apply in the same way, but there's some policies that are super finicky. So some of the coverages that may be available for crisis incidents are bodily injury, property damage, counseling services, medical costs, funeral costs, event cancellation, reputational harm. So those are some of the coverages that may apply. And then some of the policies, obviously, CGL policy and auto policy, workers' comp, those are the obvious ones. What about builder's risk? I had a client who had a cofferdam issue. There was preparation for a flood that was coming, and up the road was the Navy Corps of Engineers. They decided to open up the gates. They flooded the river without letting our clients know. They had designed a new system of a cofferdam really to protect the species as required in that area. Cofferdam floated away, and they were in recovery mode because now they had their really all the materials they were floating away. I mean, it was a really big issue for them. So they spent a large part of the next few days really looking for the cofferdam that had floated, all the material that had floated. They did not report it to the builder's risk, at least as the builder's risk policy determined timely. So when the claim came in, and it was a really expensive claim, they had redesign issues. So it was an $11 million claim. The insurance company said, sorry, you guys reported it late. We're not paying for that. And so our responsibility as a broker was, wait, let's go. So we were able to find arguments to say, well, you guys didn't respond timely enough. So we were able to get them some recovery. But from an $11 million claim, they got a $1.5 million recovery. So again, a really big gap there. And it really just tells you, report timely, report it all. Even if you don't think it may become a claim, your broker should be your first line of defense when it comes to that. Just talk to them. Say, hey, this is crisis that just happened. I just want to put my policies on notice because this is important and I don't want to ensure I'm waiving my coverage. Another one I want to talk about is professional liability. This is a big one. Professional liability is a very finicky claim or policy. If you don't report it timely, they're not going to cover you at all. And most contractors don't get coverage for professional liability claims because of late notice. So as an example, I had a client who was their curtain wall installer. They had a glue component to it. The glue component was failed. Something with the supplier, they had to switch suppliers at the end. They realized ahead of time that the glue was failing. And so they needed to go and rectify a piece of that building because there was a really big possibility that the facade was the curtain wall was gonna start detaching, potentially falling. It was injury to potentially pedestrian, property damage, the whole thing. So what they did was they put the subcontractor on notice. So the subconsultant that makes the glue, they put them on notice, but they didn't tell the insurance company. So in this particular situation, the insurance company provides coverage to repair before it becomes a claim. So yes, you can basically have insurance company repair that facade piece or the glue component. But in this situation, they did not tell the insurance company, hey, subconsultant's at fault, I'm going after them, but you should know that. And so the insurance company said it's late notice. So I'm not going to cover you for rectification, but I'm also not going to cover you for protective. Protective means that policy gives you excess coverage if your subconsultant doesn't pay. So they lost coverage on that. That is also something that went into litigation and got funded for a long time. But my point is something that may seem as a design error or an issue can turn into a professional liability claim. So make sure you're reporting that to your risk management team, to your broker team. It should really be kind of a joint effort. Part of our role as a broker is to help our contractor clients create these crisis management plans, create the reporting tree. This is not something you should be doing on your own, because if you're doing it on your own, potential is that we can miss something. So how do we leverage our experience and the people that we can bring to the table with you guys and your risk management team to create a very comprehensive plan?
Where do errors in the mission fall?
Yes, errors and omission is professional liability coverage. So that's where it is. An error, a design error, an engineering error would fall into that policy. But timely reporting is as soon as you know of something or something's in writing. If you get an email from someone that says, hey, I think that facade is tripped, something should be done about it, and you go on to investigate and do the things, and then 2 months later, you're like, yeah, there's a problem. We need to fix it. We have a cracking issue. And you report it 2 months later, they're going to go back and say that initial email was noticed and it's late. And so we're not going to cover you. So super sensitive. And then I want to talk about a couple of key strategies to remember. Everything's discoverable. I've said that anything that you put in writing is going to show up in court. So I know root cause analysis are important. Just don't name a root cause analysis. Name them something else. Change your name, because when the attorneys write a discovery request, they're going to name it root cause analysis or post-accident investigation. If you name it something else with your attorneys, it's harder for them to find. So it's things that you can address simply by changing the name of it. And again, having attorneys, what we used to do on the site is we would send the attorney, they would collect it, they would complete the investigation themselves, and that would be sealed under attorney-client privilege. So there's ways to keep that from getting into the hands of a plaintiff attorney. It's really more, let's look at your incident report, let's look at your root cause analysis. How can we change the name and how can we change the procedure if there's a crisis? 2, practice. We talked about that. Practice your crisis management plan to be effective. Revisit it often with your key resources. Effective communication, clear, frequent, appropriate communication to manage the story narrative. You want to manage that story. You don't want the media or someone or an scared employee to manage it. People like to gossip. Don't let them gossip. Tell them your story. What is the story? It has to be quick and it has to be concise and it has to be simple. You don't want to wait a week to tell and address your employees, because trust me, the gossip mill is going to be running and they're going to call their cousin and who's going to call Twitter and whatever it is. It's going to show up in social media. You don't want that. Address it quickly. And then timely report your claims to insurers. And then I put surety here because, again, from a financial standpoint, some of the contractors forget to make that important call. The sureties are a protective measure for them. So making sure that you're including your resources in this. And that's it. Do you guys have any questions for me?
Guys, ask your questions, take advantage.
right.
If you are online, this is the time for you to ask your questions as well.
Okay, I didn't see any questions. All right, well, thank you so much, guys, for the interaction. I really did appreciate it.
Thank you all very much. Thank you, Izzy, for being here. I feel like you should rename this presentation, Everything is Discoverable. So thank you very much. I love that being the main point. Oh, we do have a question. Yes, sir.
Are we going to be getting something via email about the presentation?
Yes, absolutely. So we'll be following up with a copy of the presentation for you all to have and use as a resource. And just as a reminder, all of our safety sessions are available on our YouTube channel. So if there's something you find useful here, right, if you want your superintendents to understand that everything is discoverable, this is probably a good presentation for you to give them. We also have things on the electrical standards, right? So there's tons of different topics that we've covered throughout the past few years that are available online as a resource for you all and your team. So please take advantage of our YouTube channel. Izzy, again, thank you very much. We appreciate you being here. Hey, really quickly, folks, just a reminder, fishing tournament is in a couple of weeks. As I mentioned earlier, we have just a couple rooms left. So if you want to come and get a hotel on property or near the property, rather, that we're going to be at, I need to know ASAP. Thanks to Milwaukee for being the title sponsors of that. As always, we will be taking July off for safety sessions. We will be returning in August. And as a second reminder, Safety Fair is happening on September 16th. We will be at Miami-Dade College North Campus. We're going to be reopening registration in a couple weeks. You all, as folks that receive our emails, will be receiving the first notice on that, so you can make sure and sign up. Any other questions for me regarding what's going on at AGC? Yes, sir.
Safety award.
Safety awards?
Yes, well,
I have your certificates. You guys will be receiving your certificates via mail. So we'll be sending them out to you. So you got them. Thank you very much. You do have one. So congratulations. Hey, any other questions? Just real quick, I know a lot of you love our golf tournament. Golf tournament's going to be November 3rd this year. We got bumped because of the Live Golf Tournament going on later in the year. So you'll be receiving an announcement on that as well. And that's it, folks. Hey, ideas for safety sessions, please come up and let me know. We love your input. We need your input. We're always looking for valuable meetings. Izzy was invited today because somebody saw her at another presentation, thought it'd be great for us. So let us know what it is that you'd like to see in here. Yes, sir.
You know, it's a Jewish holiday, September 16th.
Yes, we are aware. Thank you. We will have some challah bread available for the holiday. You're good. Don't worry about it. So cool. Anybody else? Thank you all for attending. We appreciate you all very much.